Hey, you are listening to Oh Crap Parenting with me, your host, Jamie Glowacki. This is a podcast for conscious parents who drop the F-bomb a lot. Hey, you guys. Welcome. Today, I want to talk about relationships and what I call the love umbrella. And this is a concept I talk about in Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler. There's some aspects of relationships that are tricky when you're parenting. Yes. Now, when we enter any relationship, whether, it could be friends, it could be intimate, it could be marriage, and it could be maybe after a separation, you're co-parenting. And so these are all relationships. And so this applies, but I really, what I'm about to talk to applies to all our relationships, but I also, this is really more for marriages and people in the same house and or co-parenting. Yeah. Now, in any relationship, right, you have two individuals who, they need self-care, right? Every individual needs some self-care. They need their own interests and they need to take care of themselves, right? But then when any two people get into a relationship, there's a third entity that's created, and that is the relationship themselves. That the relationship is its own entity, right? It's the combination of you two together and I can't even think of the word, the meshing of both of you. Yes. And so that's what I really want to talk about, because the relationship needs attending to. And I think we talk a really good game these days about self-care and what that means for us. And I'm always so happy to see moms, especially, taking the time to take care of themselves, whether that is reading crappy fiction, adult coloring books. I found an adult coloring book that I love. It's all swear words. It's really funny. I can post some pictures if you want. But no matter what, you need to take care of yourself, right? And you need to bring your healthiest self to the relationship. And I read this once and it made so much sense to me. And it said, I'm going to take care of me for you, and you take care of you for me. And I just love that, because I think sometimes we get into this codependency where we think the other person is supposed to take care of us. And yes, of course, if we get sick, we expect our spouse to help and take care of us. And if we have emotional wounds, I would expect somebody to be side by side, but those are my wounds. It's for me to take care of, right? I would love support and love through that, but it is up to us to bring our healthiest self. And I don't mean performative. I don't mean covering or masking, hard times, not like that. Of course, again, we want love and support from our spouse, but we don't want them to just be in charge of our care, right? Because that becomes a burden too. And I do see a lot of marriages where there's that unhealthy codependent dynamic where one person's kind of always the mess and the other person's kind of always picking up the pieces. And that's not what I'm talking about. But you're both responsible for the relationship. And that is where I see some things in my work that can contribute to separation, high divorce rate that's happening right now. I know after the pandemic, there was a huge spike in divorce rate. Turns out being around your spouse all the time isn't probably the best idea, right? And I know for some people, generally speaking, of course, I'm not married. This is just what I see in my work. And I mean, some people, absolutely you've married your best friend. But what I often see happen is when you have a child, sometimes the child starts to take precedence. And in this day and age where we're expected to be everything for our kids, attend to every emotion, don't take your eye off of them because you're a terrible parent. God forbid your kid fall off the playground equipment and break their arm. It's your fault, right? No longer is it like kids are taking risks and accidents happen. We're expected to be on top of them. And I see this happen a lot in marriages, and the child becomes the center and the marriage sort of drifts apart because you're so busy with the kid. I also see, I see sometimes, when I'm working with a family, I'll often have to call out postpartum depression. I see moms get very, very anxious, over-involved, with babies. And of course, newborns need so much care. I'm talking above and beyond. A kind of shunning of dad I've seen happen. And that is a sign of postpartum depression. So I wanted to kind of call that out, right? And I know it's so hard the first year. The first year, you're so underslept, right? And there is like such a steep learning curve to parenting. I always say to my friends, God, I wish I could have a baby now. Now that Pascal's 18, and I'm like, oh, cool. I did it. I know how to raise a human, right? I mean, I do things so different. I'm sure you feel that way too. Like, I don't know. I get 5 onesies and 2 pairs of socks and call it a day, and a baby carrier. Just keep going on with my life with the baby on me. But I see a regular, not paying attention to the marriage and not paying attention to the relationship because everything revolves around the child and the child. And that's really not healthy. And I'm not talking about just date nights, right? I think date nights kind of get overblown, and date nights are hard, man. Getting a babysitter or trying to get out of the house. I think date nights are hard. I do mean though, regular meetings, right? Like, how do you attend to the relationship? How do you attend to the marriage now that you have another relationship to contend with, this new baby or another child, or maybe you're on your 3rd child, and family life is going to get even more overwhelming, right? And so, like, who has the time to help to deal with the marriage too, right? But I mean, there's attending to various aspects, right? And so sometimes that might mean having a regular meeting along with fun dates, along with sex. And, I know sex is, challenging after childbirth, to be sure, but a longer term loss of libido, or I see a lot of moms who are, I work with a lot of moms who are crying because they don't even want their husband to touch them. Again, that's a sign of postpartum depression. So please get help for that. Don't let that linger. And dad, if you're listening to this, one of the things about postpartum depression, I recently went through a pretty severe bout of depression, which I'm not prone to. I was completely burnt out. I'll do a podcast on that, what happened to me. But, man, you can't see it when you're in it. And so I think we put an onus on the mom, like, oh, get help. But sometimes moms can't even see it. Yeah. And they can say there's a loss of libido. Don't touch me. Don't be near me. And the dad can get kind of butthurt and be like, okay. But you have to start calling these things out, and not to your wife in a contentious manner, but like this could be something. Yeah. So pay attention to that after, postpartum can be even up to 3 years after the baby's born. So keep your eye on that. If it's sudden, it could be a hormonal issue too. But anyway, you want to attend to sex, you want to attend to finances, you want to attend to parenting. And these require work. These require carving out time, and it doesn't have to be a lot of time, but it does require regular, consistent meetings, I think is the best way to put it. I think, as I wrote in Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler, what I see happen in marriages is that spouses tend to use their love as a crash pad, and it really needs to be an umbrella, a love umbrella that protects the family from the storms. Yeah. And using it as a crash pad means, like, once everything else is taken care of, after the house, after the kids, after everything's done, you and your spouse get the crumbs. Yeah. And so you use it, and I've heard people say, well, I know he loves me. I know he does. And it's like, oh, does he? Does he? Where are you guys on that spectrum? How do you show that love? And granted, so many parents I know almost become a platonic team. Like, you could be the best parent and you've got the schedule worked out and everything's worked out and you're a really, really good team and making everything run efficiently. But is there romance? Is there love? Is there affection? Does the other person really know? And we all need to be reminded of love. We all need to be reminded that, we're appreciated or we're loved, or that our spouse finds us sexy or still likes our ass, or, those kinds of things. It matters, right? And so that love should be an umbrella that, again, protects the family. And I have spoken out on this, and I see things online, about this. And there's people who will comment and say, absolutely, the children come first. And I have to disagree. I think the parents come first because they're running the show. And if you crash and burn, the whole boat goes down with you. Yeah. And I have worked with people through, oh gosh, I've been in this space now for 18 years in the parent education space. And I have worked with so many people, and in my personal and professional lives, without a doubt, I have heard people who say they had the best childhood. And I'll say, what was so great about it? And they can articulate it now. And of course, this is in hindsight. They couldn't have articulated it when they were a child. They said, my parents put their marriage above everything else. And I felt safe and secure. And I think I've heard this hundreds of times. So it can't be a fluke. And I had friends, even in my birth class, we had a birth class, when you're pregnant. And I remember two of the moms telling me that, like, nope, the marriage takes precedence because, kids are going to come and go. They're going to leave you. And so you want to keep your marriage alive, not just for when the children are gone, but also because it does make children feel so safe and secure. And don't fret, if you are a single parent like I am, your self-care, that's the glue that holds the family together. So when you're married, your marriage, and part of that marriage is taking self-care individually and together, but also your self-care as a single parent becomes the glue. Because if you let shit slide downhill, oh man, it goes downhill really fast. So I think that's worth noting, though, that the reports out there are when you put your marriage first, and it's not that you don't care about your kids, it's just that you don't sacrifice the marriage for the kids, which, especially as they get older, they get into sports and you're separated and you just don't connect as much. And you can find yourself, I hear this a lot too, once the children are grown, now you have nothing in common. You devoted yourselves to that. Now the common denominator is gone and you guys lost your connection and there's nothing left. So I just think it's really important to attend to that third entity of the relationship. So now what does that look like? Because it can look like quite a few things. Yeah. Let's see. I work regularly, of course, with families, and I find the families that have the best parenting, the best marriages, very stable relationships, and they kind of just need tweaks, right? That they have regular fun date nights. And these don't have to be extravagant, right? They can be meaningful. It can be picking out a movie together. One of you makes popcorn, the other one makes, I don't know, bacon. and you carve out that time, and that should be a fun time that you guys don't talk about the children. I really think there needs to be a couple of meetings that have to happen on a regular basis. I think there needs to be some sort of fun that you don't talk about the children, and whatever that looks like. It could be those pottery places where you paint the pottery. It could be the paint and vino things that they do. It could be a kayak ride. It doesn't have to be a fancy restaurant. It doesn't have to cost money. It could be just a walk holding hands, get an ice cream cone, something fun. And you have to practice not talking about the children. Talk about your interests. Talk about maybe you don't have any interest. Maybe you lost all your interests. Maybe you're struggling. Yeah. I think you need to have a regular parenting meeting. And I think you need to have a regular meeting to air grievances, talk about finances, talk about the division of labor, make sure that everything is, where are the faults in the system? And this one family I worked with, they were great. They had 15-minute check-ins at the end of the night. And they had these really fun, one night it would be, let's go over our finances, make sure we're still in line with each other, because sometimes unbeknownst to one spouse, another spouse could pick up a little Amazon habit, a little Target habit, be maybe overspending, and make sure you're in line, make sure you have a will, your budgets, put things in trust so that you don't have to deal with probate should something happen to your spouse, those kinds of things, right? And it's really hard to sit down when you have a couple of kids, and weekends are full and you're working and all of that. So carving the time, and again, these don't have to be big, long, or extensive, but if you make them regular, like this one couple I was working with, they did it every night and it was a quick check-in. And so nothing got behind them, or ahead of them. Nothing got out of their grip because they just checked in with each other. I think it's really important to have a parenting meeting. I've talked about this extensively, but if you think about the trajectory of your life, right? Like you probably met your spouse, you dated, got engaged, then it was the wedding, then it was the, you buy a house, then you maybe get a great job, a better job. Then you're pregnant. Then it's the baby shower and learning about, all the baby stuff and buying the baby stuff and getting the nursery ready and, reading the parenting books. But nothing prepares you for a 2-year-old's tantrum. Like you could read every parenting in the book, but then when it's your kid throwing themselves on the floor, you're like, holy shit, what do we do now? Nothing prepares you for the kid who comes out of the womb with boxing gloves on, right? Or if your child is neurodiverse and there's no way to prepare for that. So then you're kind of just already on the treadmill when the treadmill picks up speed, whatever the issue may be, right? And these things you can't possibly know when you're pregnant. You just can't, right? And so then what happens is you're kind of playing catch up because, dad might be reading this, you might be reading that, dad might be watching YouTube videos, you might be on Instagram, finding out more things about your kid or parenting strategies or how to deal with a certain issue. But what can happen is you can separate in your parenting philosophies, right? Or maybe you didn't even know that your spouse would be a yeller or a crier in the face of parenting struggles. And so this can really separate you as parents. So I think it's very, very important to do a parenting meeting so you guys can regularly stay on the same page. And this is one of those things that can just get away from you. It can just get away. And it can really divide you and build resentments because it feels like you should be on the same page automatically, but there's no guarantee of that, right? And so I think it's just really important to keep checking in again so that it doesn't get away from you, so that it doesn't separate you and build resentments. And on that note, I just think there's, again, a brief meeting that needs to happen on a regular basis where you can air your grievances, and you have to create a safe space for each other. So you're not snapping at each other during the day and hurting each other. And, I call them scratches on the heart, right? They're not cataclysmic, but you can have death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? And so some of these things just create these little tiny scratches, but the scratches start to build up and eventually they'll start bleeding, So I think creating a safe space, I would highly recommend if you want to improve your communication with your spouse, if you want to improve your communication in general, but Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg is like a freaking awesome hack to better communication without years of therapy. And it's a book, there's a workbook. A lot of areas have practice groups. I was in a practice group. It takes some practice, but it's really a way to communicate your feelings, particularly in hard conversations, in a nonviolent way, in a non-attacking way. And all of us need help with this. Unless you're like a Buddhist monk, most people, if you get attacked, right, or verbally attacked or accused, or somebody's being passive aggressive, we get defensive, and it just starts this snark. And that snark is going to get you nowhere but division and resentment. So I highly recommend that if you are struggling. You want to absolutely create a safe space. Sometimes we take out so much of our shit on those people that are closest to us, and your spouse. You got to be a team. You have to, and you can't. There can't be snark, and there can't be name calling, and verbal attacks. You just can't. It'll erode your relationship. Yeah. So. And then, like I said, I think there absolutely should just be some time, if not on a weekly, bi-weekly, maybe monthly, just make time for these things. And again, like I said, this one family I worked with, they just had nailed it down, and it was a beautiful thing to see. Very quick check-ins, and they felt so connected, and they felt like they were such a good team together, and they were able to keep their romance and their sex life and all the things because of these regular check-ins. It's wild. It's, again, I just think about it, it's like, you can't possibly, when you first get married, you can't possibly imagine the struggles you're going to have. You think so, but having kids is a whole next level, right? And so you have to keep current with it. And I think too many people don't keep current with it and expect the other person to have exactly the same mindset. But no, that doesn't happen at all. Now, if you have a bad marriage, and if there's abuse, or there's a bad marriage, I also advise get out. I don't like the divorce rate right now. I think people do give up too quickly, or maybe they get married too quickly, or they don't know the person as well as they thought they did. And bad marriages exist. And in that case, of course, extricate yourself. That has to happen. I'm not saying stick with it through anything, but staying, if you have a bad marriage and you stay for the children, a lot of people have that thought, and don't do that. Kids feel everything. And remember, you are teaching your child every single second. They are watching, they are feeling your nonverbal communication. And if you are with somebody and it's bad for whatever reason, and there is snark and there is resentfulness, and there's tension in the air, your kids are going to feel that, and you are teaching them how to love. So I completely disagree with the, staying in a bad situation for the children. It never works out. The children know. They will always know. And you can't hide that. Yeah. And I also know that for a lot of people, they slip into a more platonic thing. Sex goes out the window, intimacy goes out the window, and they make a good team, and they figure, oh, we'll just be a good team for the kids. And, that's your call. But I do think it's wise to remember that we're always teaching kids. And if you don't have love and affection and that intimacy, that's not physical. It's an emotional intimacy. If you don't have that, the children will know, and that's what they'll learn. So that's my bit on that. Okay, let's talk about a couple of the things that you really shouldn't do that I see happen. I see happen in my work, and it can be a little heartbreaking to watch. And sometimes I can advise on it, and sometimes parents don't really want to hear it. So one of the things that you don't want to do is hide behind the other parent and let them be the authoritarian heavy. And this often comes out in some sarcasm. This often comes out when things are kind of taking a downward spiral in the marriage, and when you're not on the same team. And this will look like something like blaming the other parent. Oh, like mommy said, no, we can't do that. So no, or, oh, daddy won't let us do that. He said we don't have enough money. Don't do shit like that. Yeah. Now I do think you've got to learn. Kids are going to learn how to play play you against each other. They absolutely are. So you have to be really careful. Like if the kid is asking moms for something, and then mom said no, and the kid just kind of went behind mom's back and to ask dad. In that case, you're like, hey, your mom said no. And then if she said no, we're a team. I say no too. So you can back up the other parent's no or yes, right? Or whatever decision was made in a loving way that says, you can't pull this on us. We're a team, right? But I see sometimes that it happens in a yucky way, which is like, oh, that's daddy's fault that we can't, I don't know, go to Disney or something like that. And you shouldn't do that. Listen, the natural order of things is siblings should align against you. Your kids should be co-conspirating to outwit you, to outsmart you, and to get away with shit. That is the natural order of things. And I've been pretty public about what happened in my family. Is my father was so abusive, and we started to align individually with my mom. My brother and sister and I don't align together against our parents. We align with our mom separately, and almost it's like it's a weird dynamic. It's created a lot of weird dynamics with me and my sister. I think that's the root of our issues, really. And that's not cool, right? That's parentifying. It's weird. It's not the natural order. Siblings absolutely should be co-conspirating against you, and you and your spouse should be like co-conspirating against them in a way, or getting ready for the catapult attacks over the wall, right? And then again, like I said, you always support your spouse's decisions, right? And if you don't support their decisions, that goes behind closed doors, and you guys hash that out, and you present a united front to the child. I see boundaries being skewed by one spouse or another, whereas, like, say one spouse is taking some self-care time or going out with friends to have some fun. The other spouse is home, lets the child watch more screen time than was agreed upon, or lets the child eat something that wasn't agreed upon, or something, right? Some boundaries are being skewed, and then that's not cool either. You have to hold the boundaries together. Otherwise, it's not really fair to the other person. These things sort of usurp the other parent's power in the relationship, and it's not fair. It's not fair to them. Like, if I don't know. Most often I see this. I hate to sound stereotypical, but I see this, like, mom goes out to a yoga class at night. Dad has to finish up some work, puts the kid on the screen, gets home, the kid's jacked up because of the screen, or I don't know, ate spicy hot Cheetos or something. And the mom's like, oh my God, I just went to one yoga class. That's the dynamic I typically see in my work. I don't mean to generalize, nothing against dads, but that can happen, right? I do find, especially if there's one of the spouses stays at home and the other works outside the home, the person who works outside the home tends to skew boundaries more because they feel like they don't get enough time with the child, or if both parents work outside the home, there can be guilt. And so then boundaries get skewed as well. So you kind of have to be in line, again, meeting at least once a month, if not biweekly, if not weekly, about parenting stuff, and making sure that you guys are on the same page. The boundary thing, I think sleep, food, I think sleep and food are the two big ones that regularly just kind of slip through our fingers, right? Like, I think, like, all of a sudden you find yourself eating just a bunch of prepackaged snacks, and you're like, oh, whoa, we need like a home cooked meal here, and I think sleep can get away from you too. It's like, oh, they can stay up 10 more minutes. Oh, they can stay up 20 more minutes. Oh, they can stay up, an hour. And that regularly just has to be reeled in like a fishing line. So don't feel bad about that. Parenting is a practice. I always say it's like going to a yoga class. Some days you show up and you can't even stand on 2 feet without losing your balance. And other days you're doing like all the poses wonderfully. And it's just a practice. You just show up. Some days you're going to kill it. Some days you're not. And it's just worth noting, like, oh, wow, sleep just kind of got away from us. Like, all of a sudden, kid used to go to bed at 7:15 and now it's 8:30. How the hell did that happen? Reel it back in, or like summer, you realize, you've had ice cream for dinner 7 nights in a row, which I'm all about ice cream for dinner in the summer. But, sometimes you have to go home and have a home cooked meal. So just watch the boundaries. And again, this is so easy, guys, to attend to these things as a unit if it's consistent. And it, again, doesn't have to be long or extravagant. And lastly, I want to talk about something that I see happen quite a lot. If bonds happen with kids disproportionately. So obviously early on, there's a heavier bonding to mom, particularly if mom is breastfeeding. So, that can be trying. And I know dads are so great, like, these days. And even I've said this before, one of the reasons when I got the revision for OCRAP potty training was so great is because when that book was published, I had never worked with a dad. Never. They weren't doing potty training. They asked for a cheat sheet. They didn't want to read the book. They didn't want to help. And that wasn't that long ago, you guys. And so I know dads are like showing up in a whole new way for parenting, and we're all here for it. Yeah. But I do still see this where, the dad isn't helping. It's up to the mom, that even if the mom pumps and puts the milk in a bottle, the dad is like, I have to go to work. So I routinely hear this. I have to go to work. So you're in charge of the baby. So dad doesn't help at all like that. Cause, like, I know it's antiquated, but I see it a lot. Cause, mom with a newborn at home is not working. Right. and then it's really interesting though, because then later, like usually around 7, 8, 9, kids usually get a preference for dad. And so that can happen. And what I often see though, oh, a side note, this is really interesting. I don't know if you've seen this. So kids get their oxytocin from mom snuggling and nurturing them, and they get their oxytocin from playing with dad. Isn't that interesting? It's, I had seen it on like memes and stuff, and I looked at the science, and it's true. And so I think that's so cool, because we know like dads are better roughhousers. They just are, right? And you know, moms are generally like to nurture, and of course generalizing. But I think it's worth noting, because the kids will show preference, and I see sometimes the other parent copping out. Yeah. So it might look like, oh, the baby's crying. The baby wants you, mom. So I'm not going to do that. You can't do that. Okay. Yeah. And you're going to have to call your partner out on it. And then I also see, like the kids, oh, like dads, the kids want you right now. So no, I'm going to let you take them. If you guys have a plan for the evening, right? And this is super important if you both work outside the home, because it is a clusterfuck when you get home, right? And pick up the kid from daycare. So it's always good to map out a plan for the evening, that morning, or even the night before. Who's doing bath? Who's doing PJs? Who's doing stories? Who's tucking in, especially if you have like 2 or more kids, right? And have that plan. And if the kid is like, no, I want mommy, no. Don't go get mommy. Mommy's doing her own thing, and we made this plan for a reason. Stick with the plan. No, daddy's doing this. So I see this happen with both spouses, where one cops out because, oh, they want you. No. You can't do that. Okay. And I know sometimes this is, I want to be delicate here. Sometimes this is a symptom of a bigger issue of like a disproportionate power dynamic in the relationship. A lot of times, I deal with people who have just kind of old school notions of what a marriage is, and the mom's in charge of the kids, and that's barely work, and I go make the money. I do see this quite a lot, even though it might not be your reality, it does exist. So anyway, if that is happening, try to catch it early. And again, I know I've said it a billion times already, but it's really about consistent meeting, making sure you're on the same page, making sure that you guys are one unit. I don't use against the kids as like a derogatory or a contentious term, but you have to be like a stable force for your kids to buck against. So it's not like, I don't want you to be a unit against them, right? But I want you to be very stable as the marriage, as the people in charge of the children, of the unit, right, of the family unit, so that your kids can do all their kid nonsense and you guys have a united front. And that, I think, would help so much with separation. Separations a lot of times just happen so slowly. You just grow apart. You don't know, you don't know how far you're drifting. You don't know how far your philosophies, your ideas of parenting, or your ideas of the future, what are your financial goals? Do you still have the same financial goals? And if you don't talk about these things, it gets crazy. I am shocked. Like, I am really shocked at how many women have no idea of their finances. And that I don't think is a great idea, right? Because things happen, death, tragedy, bizarre, quick separations, divorces. So I think it's always a good idea to be aware of the finances as a couple. All right. That's all I have. I was going to say, on that note, I'm done. As always, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you listening. I have talked numerous times on this podcast about the Oh Crap Cafe, and there seems to be a little confusion. The Oh Crap Cafe is for parenting, as is this podcast. Yes, the Oh Crap Cafe is not an online group for potty training. I do have just opened a new group called the Poop Group. So if you are struggling with poop or poop withholding in your parenting journey, you could join that group. And I don't have a general potty training coaching group yet. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm clarifying that on all podcasts, on all channels, because there's been some slight confusion. All right, guys, as always, I appreciate you. Rock on and have a beautiful day.
Okay, bye everyone. Just a reminder, if you need additional resources, I have Oh Crap Potty Training. I have Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler. Those books are available everywhere you want to find a book. You can also go to my website, jamieglowacki.com, where you can book private sessions with me, buy any of my courses. Those are really geared towards potty training help. And also I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore, and I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, jamie.glowacki, and I do a lot of lives and usually posting a lot of good information. So those are extra resources for you. And as always, rock on. Have an awesome day.